Hey guys, thank you for joining us for an exciting episode of YOML. Today we're doing 246, Reflection 246, and it happens to be a part 4 or 5 reflection, one of the top 5 books that we have in our toolbox, which is Sapiens. I guess this is aligned with what Clubbing is about, so let's talk about it.
So obviously this is one of the top 5 favorites, right? And this is part 4 of 5. And this particular revelation, I read this book pretty early on in this journey. I think it was I want to say September of 2020 when I first read this book. I remember when I finished it, actually. I just had a tennis tournament in Dayton, Ohio. I was on my way back from the tennis tournament in Dayton, Ohio. I'd won the tournament, actually. And I remember being more excited almost to get back in the car to finish this book on the way there. Because I was like, man, I had it was like a 3-hour drive or whatever, 2.5-hour drive to get to the tournament from my house. And, I had done a big chunk of it on the way there and then like a big chunk of it and finished it on the way back. And I was like, and in between the tournament, because I was there for 2 days, I was by myself. So I was in a hotel room and I was like, I couldn't wait to keep reading. I was just devouring this book. I was like, man, this is awesome. I couldn't stop. So while I was by myself in a hotel room, I was just churning away. I think I read this book in 3 days in between a car ride and hanging out in a hotel room after my matches were over in between match days. So this book just had my brain just like spinning the different ideas and thoughts and whatever. And it was around this time during this whole journey where you and I started to explore culture together a lot, right? We were talking about the power of culture. And I hear this book and it's just like, talking about how culture has been so impactful to humanity in general. And this idea in my head has only gotten further and further, exploded over the past 3 years, and as well as you, because we talk about this stuff all the time, right? The power of culture. This is kind of the genesis of that for me. This is why I decided to write about it on one of my reflections from this, because it really started with Sapiens, in my opinion, for me, of truly understanding the impact of culture and how it has shaped humanity and where we are today, right? The reflection title of this is Culture is Our Biggest Weapon. We've talked about this before in the past. I believe that imagination is our superpower as humans. The ability for us to dream up whatever we want to dream up. Maybe deers can do it. Maybe other mammals can do it. Maybe beavers can do it. I don't know. But for whatever weird reason, they can't seem to communicate what's in their mind to other deers and transport an idea from their head to somebody else's head. I don't know if they have great imaginations, is my point. All I know is we have incredible imaginations to perceive and dream into the future and see pictures in our head and bring it to life, and thoughts become things like we've talked about in the past, right? Well, in my opinion, if imagination is our superpower, I think culture might be our biggest weapon, because to get those ideas out of our head, our imagination, and into somebody else's head, we invented all these things to be able to communicate from me to you, the words that I'm using right now, right? Like we talk about always being impeccable with your words, right? Like the more clearly you can describe an idea, a picture, or whatever that's forming in your head, and be able to describe that to somebody else, that's when that idea then becomes real, at that point in time. And when that idea becomes more than just one person, you start to figure out, well, how can we turn this into something, and as that idea spreads and that mission spreads, we build organizations around these ideas, and that ultimately becomes culture, right? I'm not teaching you anything that you don't know, but for me, that is a massive weapon in our arsenal of how we've impacted this world. Is we've been able to scale ourselves and scale our ideas and be able to share that amongst all of us, to be able to say, hey, we can go kill a mammoth together. If 10 of us collectively imagine a way to all work together to trip this mammoth with a rope or something like that, let me go explain to you what it is, and we all work together and we trip a mammoth and we all eat more, whatever it may be, right? My point of what I'm getting at is culture is powerful. It is incredibly powerful for us to be able to communicate with each other and to bring the ideas that we imagine to life and to turn them into a true thing that we can then go impact this world. But culture is a double-edged sword. This shit is not to be taken lightly, in my opinion. The people that are flippant about culture and they're bringing any ideas into this world, they don't understand power behind of what they're doing, in my opinion. Because culture has the ability to take us to the moon, or has the ability to also get us into World War II and kill 6 million people, right? Those are all ideas that became things that people built the culture around to be able to go do this stuff, right? So it is no joke, in my personal opinion. And for you and I, we have been very serious about this culture that we are trying to build within the world that we are calling Clubbany. We take it so seriously that we've spent 3 fucking years talking about it. You know what I mean? And it really, truly is. We are painstakingly making sure that we understand and we are impeccable with our words of how we communicate to each other and how we bring this idea to life, because we know that once it's unleashed onto this world, like culture, you can't put the genie back in the bottle, right? Like it only spreads. If it does its job right, it only spreads, and eventually at some point in time, we don't own it anymore, like it eventually at some point in time, the idea of going to the moon was no longer owned by JFK, or whoever the people that dreamed it up, right? It was now taken on by millions and millions of other people that were out there working and brainstorming and ideating of how we go execute on these things, right? Like, so that's the power of culture, in my opinion. It is our biggest weapon, but also the thing that we need to be the most impeccable with our words about, because like it is not something to fuck with, in my opinion. So yeah, I'd love to hear your thoughts. That's what I'll stop there.
I agree with you in terms of what culture is. And in my opinion, people don't really understand what culture is, right? They probably think they understand. Just like they say, well, culture is something that people do. It is, but it also isn't. Because the way I see it is that because our imagination is our superpower, our imagination allow us to, I guess, communicate in a way that we can understand, even if you and I get together and we don't understand each other, we as a species can collectively define the commonality between what we're going to talk about, right? So that's the difference between us and a dog or a deer. I think a dog and deer can also imagine, but it's not as fluid
They can
because
communicate.
they can communicate, but that is something they are instinctively have been inherited for years. They can't change it. That's my point, is for us, we can change it. You and I can say, well, you get together and say, well, this is who I am. This is the way I talk. I say, well, you and I can say, hey, let's get together and call, red, yellow, right? And we can say, well, that's our new code. Anything that's red, we call it yellow. You and I can start speaking a different language. You and I have been talking in a language we set them ourselves. So this is the super weapon that we have as a human species. We have that because our brains is bigger. We have the ability to imagine, and our imagination is fluid, and it's going to be very prevalent versus a dog or deer or cat or whatever. I think they do have, but it's limited because of the capacity of their brain. It's not as fluid. They cannot change the way. Hey, let's walk in a different patterns, and the other guy will understand, because the other dog won't say, "Hey, I don't know what you're doing." So they will never get to the end and say, okay, you make something subtle different. I want to understand what it is. And so they can talk to each other, but only in a defined pattern they are used to. For me and you, is you and I can get together, totally strangers, totally have no idea what we're talking about. We can actually communicate in a way because that's what we do. So a culture is a common understanding, it's a common belief, a common agreement of something. Like we agree, like traditions and culture. Like culture in America is, we embrace freedom of speech, freedom of this and that, freedom of
Life,
individual
liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
And that's the thing, is that's a culture. And so the culture, there's two ways to the culture. To the culture, it could be by what you call like evolution, meaning you just let it happen, or you can purposely use a seventh generation committee to kind of like carve the stone into the statue of David or whatever that is you want to carve into. So culture has that ability, the pros and cons of culture. And the thing is, the culture say, hey, if you pile something together, let's say you and I, we build this company up, and then we let anyone with any kind of ideas come in and say, well, let's mix them and just make a hodgepodge of culture. It is a culture, but it's probably not a culture we want, because it's so if we have to protect the culture, hey, this culture has this. Because you think about it, in the United States, right? The United States, to me, is one of the most successful, I guess, empire in a modern world. It's just because of the way that the Constitution was written, right? It was written, and then the Constitution, like for you and for me, is we live in this country, right? We have been shared this culture. This culture was told to us, hey, this is a culture. It's not to say, hey, you do whatever you want, you can be a tyrant or whatever. That is against the culture of what we have. So that culture won't allow.
They wrote it. They straight up wrote it. Like, I mean, they were like, this is what our culture is. It's life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. It is this constitutional right, and it is this constitutional right. We have, yeah, you're right. Like, I mean,
and it is written, and every single time you have a disagreement, you bring out the Constitution and say, does this align with the Constitution? Right? You ask yourself, what other countries that does this? Not very many countries does this. Okay, they have said, well,
not very many
imagine,
at
because
all.
you think about it, like in America, we have the most variety of different ethnic groups versus in other country where it's very, like, they're very, I guess, concentrate in a certain particular group, and that's harder. It's harder for them to be different in their belief, right? But like I said, even if my culture, let's say my culture is an Asian culture, I come here, I don't actually take the culture and have a conflict with the culture of America. You just don't do that, because you go to the Constitution. But if the Constitution is not being upheld, you can write it and just store it into the closet. It's not being upheld, then nothing is going. I mean, you cannot
document.
You cannot like protect the ideas, right? You cannot protect the concept or the belief that you have, and that culture is basically, it goes by evolution. Different people bringing in different things too, and they assimilate into, and whatever that is, it is still a culture, but it may not be the culture that you want. And sometimes,
sorry, you made me think of something I wanted to grab. My Delta Chi cornerstone. Talk about the Constitution of Delta Chi. It has every rule written in here of what it means to be a Delta Chi fraternity brother, starting with every founding father, their values were, what the rituals are that we do, the history, the badges and what they mean. It's the Constitution of the fraternity that I joined. Every real culture has a written document,
right?
Honestly,
every culture has a written document, but the difference is like, how well are you protecting your culture with the seventh generation committee? Some people have the document but don't enforce it, and when you don't enforce it, right, it evolves on its own, and then it not turn into something you may not like.
Do you know what the culture was? The actual culture of Delta Chi was?
I wouldn't know.
Take a guess. What do you think the culture of Delta Chi fraternity was? What do you think the actual culture? What do you think happened in my fraternity? Do you think it was,
It's very strict. It adheres to all the rules. That's why there's a book.
No, that's not what happened. That is not what the culture was.
So it's an unspoken culture.
The unspoken,
not a written culture.
That was the culture of my fraternity. Like, I mean, and that's what the culture of most of those fraternities are. Like, and I'm not saying that was what they were founded as, but I'm saying that's what it became. To your point, like, nobody read this. Like, we had to study it for our pledge stuff, and then we had to go, regurgitate it out. But it was no different than, like,
So it's not being enforced.
It was not being enforced, right? Like, so, like, to your point, like, the actual culture that became, my fraternity, that ultimately got kicked off of campus, 10 years after I left, Purdue. Right now, they don't have a house right now. They took away our massive mansion because we broke some rules and had a lot of underage drinking going on and other stupid shit that happened, and they violated that was the real culture. Like, I mean, let's just be honest.
I mean, right? Really good example of what you mean when you have to be very careful with this culture thing. It's serious. Right. Because, like, you're talking about, like, very, very minor things. It happens to your fraternity. The major things are the Nazi, right? So the thing is it can be both good and bad, because the thing is our ability to be fluid and flexible and come together, build new rules and new structures, new common belief. That's the superpower we have, as the imagination allows us to do. And the culture is like the connector. It connects each one of us to one another. And that creates this multitudes, right? We basically are what you call, like, I contain multitudes. Like, the culture contain multitudes of imaginations, and that becomes exponentially the multiply the exponential power of each individual imagination. That's what culture is, and culture allows you to connect to every single one of us, and that creates this massive unit. You think about it: if each one of us becomes a unit, it is formidable. You're talking about a group of hunters, 5 to 10 people, take down a woolly mammoth, right? That is the power of culture in the smallest scale possible. Right. They're talking about 5 to 10 people taking down a mammoth, like 5 times their size, 10 times their size, right? You're talking about if you have thousands of people, millions of people, like in the United States of America, right? there are 300 million people. You're talking about if everybody, most of the culture, most people live in the same culture, right? It is so formidable. Who would want to go against this kind of a unit?
They don't.
It's a
That's
unit.
the
So
point. Yeah, right.
so that's the superpower of the culture is.
Right.
The power of culture is that powerful.
When you
But it's
really believe.
also because like any weapon, it can be used for good or evil. It's a double-edged sword. You have to be careful with this thing. You can't just use it willy-nilly. Right? If you don't have a specific aim at the culture will evolve on its own, and it may not be what you like. That's
like
the warning I'm giving against the culture. Sometimes you think that you can say, well, what my culture and what their culture is not going to clash, right? The workforce today, you're talking about they don't have own culture, and they may have a written culture, but the written culture is not being enforced. They have an unspoken culture,
right? Yeah.
And then you go into there and you look at this written culture. Hey, that jive with what I believe in, but then in reality, it doesn't. They don't practice that, and that creates this tensions and create this chaos. And in this conflict itself, it creates its own culture.
What's really interesting is that microcosm. You're right. Cultures that die are the ones that start with an idea of who they want to be. They may spend a year and a half going through and defining every single day of what this means and where this idea came from, and refine. They may do what we're doing right now. They may write this book. They may have a constitution. But to your point, if there's some entity that is keeping the broader group connected to that original founding idea and understanding what it is and being able to spread that, then the further you get disconnected from it, like you said, is when chaos starts to happen. But you can actually extrapolate that down to the lowest common denominator of each individual, right? Like the funny thing is in our own personal lives, who we say we want to be, and the further that we get away from that with our actions, the more chaos our life becomes, and the more that we feel depressed, anxiety, whatever, like, so even in a culture, like at a massive level versus a micro level of an individual, the same rules apply, right? Like we are still idea driven people, entities, right? Like we believe in who we say we want to be, but then we go do something else and we feel sick to our stomachs and we feel awful, we feel depressed, we feel that gap growing, and we're like, this isn't who I am, but this is what I'm doing every day and I can't stop it, right? Like same thing with the culture, like you said, like this culture went from about law and fraternity and brotherhood to let's get fucked up and try to bring have every girl that we can possibly have over and try to hook up or something like that, right? Like that's really what the culture became. And honestly, that's probably why we got kicked off campus. You know what I mean? My fraternity was a stepping stone toward that fraternity, right? Like, I mean, we were no longer aligned to the original founding principles.
Right, sliding down the scale. Right? So
right.
You slide down a little bit, and eventually it's going to hit the bottom. And so when you hit the bottom, you're going to have these consequences.
Right.
And the consequences could be, hey, I scrape my knees, or in the case of you get kicked out of the university, or your charter get revoked. So now culture, if you don't adhere to the principle and core belief, if you don't really believe it, right? Let's say you and I can get together and say, hey, Chris, I'm an honest guy, right? I don't lie to you. So I'm just telling you, right? I'm convincing you that I am an honest guy. So I practice it. But in reality, I don't have the soul in the game, right?
Right.
So how long would that last? So that's the thing is if you preach these rules and definitions to persuade somebody to be part of this culture, but you don't practice it, it doesn't last, and you allow dilutions of these rules, right?
People see
these rules,
they know a phony,
right? Because the thing is, you're not gonna say, well, for me and for you, we don't run for trains. We don't run for trains, right? And so the thing is, yeah, I can run a little bit. Maybe I do half speed, half pace, right?
I run for trains, true. Like let's be honest. Like, I mean, I'm that is not one of my core values. It is one of my ideals. I would love to not run for trains, but as well as I know, I believe that you don't run for trains.
But I still preach it,
right. But I don't preach that.
You don't preach it because at the same time you are striving to get there.
Sure, I'd love to.
Right,
that's an ideal.
Right? So it's not like you preach it and then not practice it. You don't preach it, but you're trying to practice. That's the point of the seventh generation community. It's like you come in and say, hey, life, you have to run for train. There's no other way about it. Liberty or death, but you still have a choice, right? That's what I say, right? So you say, hey, in life, you have to follow the rule. You have to do this, you have to do that. It's like, Well,
No.
it's up to you.
Right.
In my culture, I don't.
Actually, we encourage the opposite of that. I mean, that's the point, right? Like, but I mean, you're right. I think the reflection that I wrote on this was what we're doing right now, right here in this moment, and what we've been doing every single day for almost 3 years now is defining, understanding, and protecting the culture that we want to create. And like, as we start to understand it better, we can say it better and we can simplify it to other people. But at the same time, we're also documenting in books and podcasts and all this other stuff, other people in the future, when someday when we're not here, like look at the Catholic Church, right? Or the
Marine
right?
Corps.
Like the Catholic Church has been around for, thousands of years now at this point in time, right? And like the way, like, why do they still exist? Like, because they have people that are protectors of the original values that this was built on, right?
Practitioners.
Right.
This is the difference between a value that you practice and a value you don't practice, right? The culture isn't going to stay if you don't practice it. It's going to disappear, and whatever you do becomes the default culture. Whatever that you do, that hey, I say one thing and say no, that's the culture on its own.
Right.
Culture on its own. Say hey,
that is like a culture of total deceit and lying. Where,
yeah, that's a culture on its own.
It's when you say that you're an Ohana, and then you fire everybody. You know what I mean? That's a culture. Yeah,
that's a modern corporate culture. Everybody no joke. I think you have the Ohana moment with with the corporate that you work for. In the other environment that I work in, like they don't say Ohana, but say we're family and we hear each other. It's like when they fire you, it's like
but we're
like
family.
it's like just like last week, right? They say we're family. We're going to protect each other. We're going to do everything. We're not gonna let anyone be with our work, blah blah, right? That's on a Friday. On a Monday, they say, hey, we have meeting at 9:15. You go to 9:15. I'm sorry, you're being let go, and then they hang up on you.
Can you
that's the family they just talk about on the Friday before that.
I mean,
that's the culture.
That is the culture, and that's why they don't survive. This is why the Catholic Church is still around. Every other company that has come and gone since then is not, because the real culture of any business is
money.
Making money. That is the intention. I don't give a fuck what you want to spin it as. If Patagonia wants to say this is about sustainability, no, it's about making money, because if it wasn't, then you wouldn't have a business. That's what it's about. So don't sugarcoat it. And if like Warren Buffett or somebody like that, I don't think that he lies about it. I think he says, I'm just trying to make the best capital allocation management that I possibly can. He's not out there saying this is about family values and whatever. No, he's like, this is about
it make me money. I'm gonna
making more of it.
Your ass.
I'm reading a book that I'm reading right now. Is so long. It's the longest book that I've ever undertaken ever. It's 35 hours. And I'm.
What are you reading? A dictionary?
Right. It's almost 1,000 pages long, and it's called Titan. It's about John Rockefeller's life. John D. Rockefeller, the Standard Oil magnate, right? But the funny thing is we're talking about this right now, and like that guy only cared about making money. Like that, he was like, look, we need to get more efficient and make more money to be able to give more dividends to our people and be able to go buy up more and further consolidate stuff and control market conditions. He didn't walk around going, this is about, he was a very devout Baptist, actually, like very devout, like, and his values that he personally had bled over into how he went about the business. But at the same time, like, he didn't fucking sugarcoat why they were in business ever. Like his personal values he used in his donating his money and trying to give it all away. Standard Oil was a money-making mission for him, so he could go give it away. He didn't walk around preaching Standard Oil is gonna, like, is an Ohana and blah, 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 blah. If you don't make me more money, then get the fuck out of here. This is the disconnect that so many people have today in the business world of they're not living their actual ideals. Like, because what they actually do has nothing to do with who they say they want to be, Well,
but the thing is, it's culture nonetheless. It's still culture. You just believe in a culture of lies. I mean, you have a disconnect, because if you say, well, if you think about it, in any culture, you can make a boatload of money. You can say, I'm the Ohana guy. I'm the Ohana culture kind of guy. Well, be the Ohana culture guy. You go in there, you lie, you cheat, you steal, right? You can make a lot of money,
Right. I
right?
guess there's a lot of people that fuck over their family.
Well, that's their Ohana. And
Right.
who's to say that's not Ohana?
They just got
But
a
the thing is,
dysfunctional family.
it's like I say, it's culture nonetheless. It's still culture. It's a culture of misfits, and the point we're trying to make is culture is that thing that has no definite direction because it could be negative, it could be positive. So the point I'm trying to say is like we want you to deep dive into a culture and understand what culture is, because for us, culture is something much, much more than what's on the surface. Okay, culture is
Oh, yeah.
so powerful. If you can really understand it, then you can actually see a lot of these things. Because, like I said, I can look at the Ohana culture, I can look at the family culture, I can look at all these culture that people claim to be. It's like I can see through them. I can say, well, that's your thing. You do you. I'm
Right.
not going to go into your little narratives, right? You can talk all you want.
The Catholic
I
Church
cannot be influenced by it.
The Catholic Church takes hundreds of years to change their mind, on something. Like hundreds of years. Like you're like, how are you so far behind the times? And they're like, what are you talking about? We're not behind the times. We're doing what we said we're gonna do. And that's why people continue to go through the Catholic Church and it continues to grow because they're like, I believe in what you guys are saying and you guys are going to take this seriously. Like we don't just change, this week if we don't believe in marriage is between not a man and a woman, we don't just, say, oh well.
And the thing is that the
like,
reason why the Catholic Church and all these culture survives is because they practice it. Okay, because you look at the Catholic Church, you practice it. It's like if somebody does something that is not like according to the doctrine, you say, well, that's not right. And same thing for me and for you, though. You come to me and you have this unbalanced day. I say, Chris, balance, man, balance. Because I'm always going to say, hey, look, there's balance. We have to practice balance. It's okay to be swayed off once in a while, but if you are trying to get back to balance, we practice that. You don't practice it, it doesn't get passed down. Okay, exactly. And the reason why the Ohana culture is still culture, but it's short-lived because you don't practice it, and you don't do what you preach. People gonna start to get wise on you, and they're gonna start to see you through the I guess the scripts that you put out in front, right? They're gonna say, well, you're the guy who said Ohana, but Ohana to you means that, hey, I don't like my family. I'm going to kick them to the curb and throw them under the bus every single chance I get. Well, that's the culture. But that culture doesn't stick around.
My Ohana is the drunk uncle that's in the corner spouting racist comments and pissing off everybody. I guess that's my Ohana, you know what I mean? But at least my uncle still, I call him my uncle. You guys just kick him out of the house. And you're like, never come back. You're not our uncle anymore. No, but you made an awesome point of practicing, right? These things like this for you and I was thinking about the Catholic Church, right? Like priests. These aren't just practitioners. These are people that studied the original ideas, became experts on those ideas, who then were placed strategically all over the world to say, okay, these are the keepers of that idea in a non-connected world, right? Like they didn't have Zoom meetings to be able to get everybody together to go do these things, right? You had these priests that would study from other people that understood that, like Buddhism, same thing. Every religion's the same way. You have people that really get it, that really understand it, that want to immerse their life. There are seminary schools where you can go, you spend, I don't know, 5 years of your life like you would in college studying these ideas. You go to a Buddhist temple or whatever where you have to go practice all their practices in order to be called a Buddhist monk or whatever, right? And then those people get sent back into the world when people want to challenge things and don't understand, but they're the ones that are there to answer those questions and help guide other people and to help be that seventh generation committee extension, out into the world. And as you think about, like how we are going to go about going through these things, I'm not saying we need to create priests or something like that, but we need to make sure that people understand what
the seventh generation committee is about. The master practitioner,
right?
So and it's all about the practitioner. It's always about practice, right? If you don't practice it, you don't have soul in the game, then there's no point.
There's no point. And you have to have a keeper of the culture,
not just yourself. Are the master practitioners are the keepers of the code.
Exactly. Like
right, and so that's why you have these really knowledgeable priests, cardinals, and then they go and they teach seminaries. And then these priests would actually learn from these masters, seventh generation community, masters practitioners, and they
Right.
will go to the individual jurisdictions and local rural areas and then start practicing that, right?
Right.
And then they in turn have volunteers, and volunteer gets, I guess, trained into how to teach catechis and
Yeah,
adult
exactly.
Catholic educations and youth Catholic educations and many. I think it always comes from the top all the way down, and it's trickled down versus it's a hodgepodge of things. You do whatever you want. They
Right.
say no, you can't do that because that is not something we're going to allow dilutions of our core
The
values.
principles, right?
If you do, then it would take a life of its own, and it's not usually, like I would say 99.99% of the time, it won't be the culture that you want. It's
I agree.
right because it's by random, right? So don't allow the illusion of your culture.
Who are
You
the
look at the
priests?
Catholic Church, you look at the Marine Corps, you look at the Texas A&M Aggies, right? Their culture are so strong that it either attracts you or repel you, right? It's not, it will not allow you to dilute it. You either understand it and you become a part of it, or you say, hey, that thing is so weird, I just can't stand it, it makes me nauseous. So you look at these cultures, these are strong culture because they practice it and they don't allow delusion. You can't say, well, you go to the Marine Corps and say, well, I don't care about my buddies, right? You won't last a day, you get outcast because that's the culture of the Marine Corps. They'll bring you back home.
Yeah, but they have, who's the high priest in the Marine Corps?
The commandant of the Marine.
There you go. And they have people that live and breathe this shit of like the generals and the colonel or whatever the fuck
The
else. Like,
drill instructor, even down to the drill instructor.
right.
You have the commandant and you have the commanders, and then commanders, you have the sergeant and the drill instructors, and the drill instructor have the squad leaders and platoon leaders, and all these. They will actually will trickle down from the master, seventh generation code keeper, and they will
Right.
pass down the code. Say, this is the code we live by, and you don't sway from it even for an inch, right? You adhere strictly to it. You look at the Marine Corps, they don't sway from it. It's not even up for discussion. It's mission, men, and me. It's the mission first, the men, and then you, right? You
Right.
are part of the men, and your man, your group is responsible for the mission. That is the culture that they practice, and they practice like perfection. The perfection in terms of how they keep. You look at the Marine Corps, any Marine, you look at a Marine, their uniforms are impeccable. Even just thing they wear is impeccable.
Right.
I mean, anything that's out of place, you just won't see it. They practice perfection from the thing they wear to how they do drills and how they perform in real life missions. It's
Right.
impeccable. That's the culture. They say, I do not accept less than perfect.
Who's
right?
the high priest of the United States of America?
That would be Congress.
It is. You're right. Like these assholes are the ones that are, that my God, if they don't believe in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and they're on Capitol Hill, like fuck. I mean, we're all fucked if that's the point. If that's the case, right? Like once that stops slipping, no more country. You
look at some of the law they put up today. I mean, some of these law just it's illogical to me.
That's how societies fail. Cultures fail. Like that's
it's collapsed from the inside. You look at the Roman Empire; it collapsed from inside. Like
they all do.
You can't really collapse the United States from outside. I guarantee you that. Because regardless of what people say, United States is the superpower because they have like the greatest military that by far beyond anyone in comparison. It's not even neck and neck. It's like men versus kids, right? That's the power that we have. As long as we have that, no one is going to overpower the United States. The only way the United States is going to fall is from within. And that's where the culture is very important. If you don't keep the culture, that becomes, if your culture is up for debate, then it won't last.
Yeah, it goes back to when's the right time to fire somebody, first time you think about it. When's the right time to doubt your culture or to leave your culture that you've devoted yourself to? Probably the first time you think about it when you're like, oh my God, these people aren't people that I thought they were, or like Scientology or something like that. You see that all the time where you're like, whoa, like this isn't what I thought it was, and then all these people now they're like
right because you think about it, let's say our core value, which is the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, right? Individual liberty. That's what one of the core principle of the United States. You think about individual liberty. That is something that is very core. And you say, well, nowadays you're gonna have to give away your liberty for some safety.
I mean, no. I mean, that's not America.
And
you know,
if
like,
and if you allow that to be a debate, you are letting dilution to come in and slowly strip it away. It's going to strip it away slowly. It's like, the sandpaper. It sands off very thin layers of it. Eventually, it's going to go away. All you have to become nothing, right? You're talking about like your ability to speak, your ability to do and pursue your hobbies, your passions, whatever. If you allow things to start creeping in, eventually you give more than you think you would, and you realize that eventually they took too much, and then by that time it's too late.
right. And our culture is a culture that is dedicated to striving for balance through meaningful work and meaningful relationships. Like, that's it. If we stray from that, like, if someday we're, like you said, if someday we're running for trains all over the place and we're doing extreme things, and that's not a balanced existence, and that's not helping people to find meaningful work and to connect and build meaningful relationships, then you go, okay, this isn't our values, and like, we need, that's what we need to pivot. Like, hey, go refer back to book 245 of the original, Year of Magical Learning Journey, or book 246, and talk about, the power of culture or whatever. And like, if anybody has any questions as to what Drew and Chris designed, what they thought of when they meant this stuff, we're saying it right now, right? Here, it's documented, it's on video, it's been written, like, like, this is what we mean. If it steers from that, then it's wrong. Don't do it, but not here, not with us.
It doesn't belong to this culture. If you say, hey, I believe in a company culture, and you say, I believe Beaver must damn, but I also believe that Beaver can be an astronaut, right? You basically, to me, it's like, no, no, not possible. Don't even try. Because the thing is, the moment you kind of like let the door kind of like swing open just slightly, right? Eventually it's gonna get wide open, and it's diluted, and your whole entire culture is completely gone. So the thing is, in order for a culture to survive, you must have to defend it. That means that you, as an American, need to defend the Constitution. Whatever you believe in, need to defend it. We, as a culture, as a member of company, we defend the culture of company. Like I say, the beaver, be a beaver. If you're a beaver, be a beaver, and beaver must damn and do the thing that you are made to do, right?
I have to challenge that. Every beaver can be whatever they want to be, but they need to discover that they are a beaver eventually and come back to being a beaver. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm not going to stop you from going, well, I feel like I'm gonna go explore down this road. Like, that's fine. Go explore.
If you're a beaver, like, and you want to be you don't want to be a foxy beaver, like, well, you don't belong here.
I'm saying I don't want to discourage them from exploring being.
No, you have to explore what you are.
Right.
Meaning what you are, you cannot change. What you are, you cannot change. I cannot change who I am. Okay.
That's what I meant. That's what I'm saying.
I can't say, hey,
you can only come up with that unless
I want to be Caucasian.
Well, that's a physical. I mean,
no, it's the same concept. Let's say I want to be.
I guess.
What you? The thing is, we talked about this before.
I'm with you. I just wanted to throw a quick little caveat into there of like, I have no problem with you exploring. Maybe today as a beaver, you want to go pick berries,
right? Because like once you know you're a beaver, you need to be beaver. But until you know you're a beaver, you need to explore the journey. Am I?
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. It's like, we're not trying to say like, like,
I'm not telling you to be a beaver.
You can't question. Like, you absolutely should question. We're just saying that once you figure out who you are, you be that person.
That's the essence of what clubbing is about. Right. It's this journey to discover who you are. Right. By nature. You have your own nature, right? And once you know your nature, then you live according to the nature of who you are. And that is what the culture of clubbing is about. Right. And if you don't do that, you don't belong in here. You can say, well, I'm a duck, but I want to be an eagle. I'm going to go to an eagle school. I'm going to do whatever. Do whatever you want. You can be delusional all you want, right? I can be beaver all I want. But the thing is, we don't cross and I don't allow you to cross into the clubbing culture, because clubbing culture, I wanted to pass on what I believe. If you can see what I believe, then you come in. That's what culture is about. I'm not asking you to see what I see. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I'm not asking you if you do see, right, and I see the same thing. This is what culture is about: the common understanding and belief of something among the species, right? It's an idea or a concept that we see. It's the same. That's what a
Right.
culture is. That's the
Yeah.
connector.
We will, because this is an ohana, and this is how we think about our employees. We will never, ever, ever fire a single one of you. Now, that doesn't mean that like we're not going to say that you're not a fit, and we're not going to encourage you to leave or something like that. But sometimes family members need to get checked, and be like, hey, look, if you want to be a part of this family, you got to be a part of the family, right? My point being, I would have had more respect for them if they would have said, we wanted to fire 10% of our company, but we chose not to because we're an ohana. Like, I would have been like, respect. Like, okay, all right, that's a family, right? Like I wanted to kick my dog out the other day when she was being a little shithead to me, and I had a lot of things going on, and I was like, I don't want to deal with your shit today. You're gone, puppy. Like, you know what I mean? But I didn't, because she's part of my family, right? Like I wanted to punch my brother-in-law in the face. I'm kidding. I mean, I didn't want to punch my brother-in-law in the face, but I'm saying I wanted to get, to tell my uncle, like, stop bitching and you're out of here. You're not a part of our family anymore, uncle. You know what I mean? Once again, I'm kidding about all these things. But my point is, like, when you pretend you are a family, then be a real family. And then I would respect that. Like, if that's what you want to be, then be it. Like, that's all that we ask, right? Like, if that's what you say you want to be,
all
then
you're
be it.
creating is misery for you and yourself and the people that you're trying to push away.
Right.
That's all you're doing.
Well, but that's the thing with a culture, is like, every time that we say no, nobody sees that, right? Every time that you don't run for a train, nobody sees that. But they do see when you run for a train and you say, I don't run for a train. That's what they see, right? Like, it's always saying the right no's, like, no, we're not going to do all these things. And you don't see all that stuff, right? Like, nobody sees all the no's the Catholic Church does every single day. Every single one of their members doesn't violate that, right? Well, we do see it when, like, the priests are molesting children and you're saying, like, what, then that's like, whoa, that's when they went horribly astray, you know what I mean? And you're like, oh, okay, well, they, that does put a little chink in your armor. Should we be questioning this at this point in time? But my point is, the best culture is the one that you never have to, we say no all the time to different ideas that we put into the fire, right? Like, we say no more often than we say yes. But when we say yes, that means something, right? That means that we thought about it.
About cooking a dish. Imagine you put everything,
right,
everything into the wok, and then you can stir fry whatever you want. It's not going to taste good. It has to have the right ingredient that fits together.
Exactly.
And you have, delicious meal. If not, then it's still a dish. It's just not a very delicious dish.
It's not one that's very appealing to people, and like, and they don't know what to expect out of that next dish that they have. Like, if you make an amazing apple pie and then all of a sudden you start throwing in, cherries and blueberries into your apple pie, and you're like, this isn't an apple pie anymore. Like, what are you talking about? Yeah, I think that's a great point. It's like, when people come to expect you to make a great apple pie,
you put apple pie, and you put apple pie.
That sounds actually kind of good. I love salty and sweet at the same time. But anyway, all right, I got to go to bed.
How about put fish in apple pie?
Don't put fish. Figure out what ingredients taste delicious, and then make that, and then people will expect that, and then everybody knows Drew makes a great apple pie.
And then the apple pie continues to be requested for cooking and for baking and whatever, right. on. If you make something that is a hot pot, it's a one and done, because no one wants it. So who's gonna ask you, say, hey, make me an apple pie? So all the good dishes that passed down from generation to generation, is because it was good, and it's made the same way every single time. It's no, today I don't have sugar, I'm going to add a fish to it. Right? You think about it. It's like,
Italian cooking, Italian cooking?
Imagine spaghetti and you put it in soy sauce, okay?
Sounds disgusting.
That's my point. You can't allow dilution just because somebody say, hey, maybe try some of this. It's new. It tastes good by itself. It come in, it should be good, right? Well, surprise, surprise. It doesn't work like that.
I could not agree more. All right, so I think that's a good place to end. The question we can leave for everybody is, in what ways has culture impacted your direction in life? A million other questions you can ask around culture as well, but it's just really powerful, and something, start to open your eyes and see all the cultures you belong to.
Powerful.
Yeah.
People don't understand the depth of how powerful this culture is. There's
a lot of ideas that you believe in that you couldn't even fathom, that you accept every single day, because we have to accept them, right? Like, I mean, I don't want to get into this, but it's like, if we all didn't accept,
that's another discussion.
Exactly. Like, if we didn't accept the idea of money, like, I can't even fathom what would happen if you gave me a green piece of paper, and I'd be like, you want to go spend 2 months of my life building your house for a piece of paper? what the shit is this? You need to go farm 10 acres and bring me food for the next 2 months or the next 3 months or whatever. What's this green piece of paper? Shit. All right, everyone, signing off for the night. Thank you all for joining, and we'll see you all tomorrow.
Okay, good night.